Looks like it's working.
Good. There's always a lag here.
Like it's working.
Okay, I think we're on. Right, so welcome to RetireJapan TV, the show where we talk about personal finance, investing, retirement, and life in Japan. And today we have some special guests. So Alan and Katie Donegan, welcome.
Thank you very much. We're excited to be here.
And we're going to talk about you. We're going to talk about Japan. And we're going to talk about your Rebel Finance School launching later in the year, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, we're very excited to get the next version online. And I can't wait to get into this. It's like our favorite subjects: Japan, retirement, finance.
Definitely. So tell us a little bit about yourselves then. So the 1 minute version.
The 1 minute version.
The 1 minute version.
Yeah, I was about to say, do you want the 1 minute version, the 5 minute version, or the 10-hour version?
You just used 20 seconds of your 1 minute.
Oh no, start the timer again.
So we found out about financial independence in about 2015, 2014. And we're like, oh, that sounds like a good idea. You can save and invest. So we started saving, investing. We sorted our own finances out. Katie quit her corporate job at 33 years old, and then came straight to work for Rebel Business School, which was my business at the time. So she didn't really retire.
It was a bit of a shock to the system.
Yes. And then we eventually hit financial independence when Katie was 35 and I was 40. And we became nomadic, travel the world, and teach people to manage money. Was that succinct enough?
Yeah, that's excellent. It's quite similar timeline then, because I got into personal finance in like 2009, I think. Started RetireJapan in 2013. So we're on a similar kind of timeline, I think. So nomadic.
Yes.
What's that about?
Well, we spent most of 2019 out of the country. So we were living in the UK and we were going off on various trips and like a month here, 2 months there, but always like returning back to the UK. And in that time, the flat that we lived in Basingstoke was empty. And we looked at our numbers, our spending for the year, and we're like, oh my goodness, we're spending a lot on something that we're not using. So we decided to sell our flat, sell all our possessions, completely clear out, get down to 2 check bags and 2 little carry-on bags. And we decided to do that at the beginning of 2020.
Yeah,
that was good timing.
The worst timing.
Not the optimal timing. So we had a wonderful start. We were in Thailand and the States, and then lockdown happened. So we went back to the UK for about 5 months, and then got back out on the road and spent most of last year in South America.
Because it was open and actively wanted people to come. But now we are, keyless. We own nothing with keys anymore. Some would say clueless, but keyless. We are homeless and unemployed.
That's what my wife says about me. Yeah.
It's life goals. Everyone should be heading towards it.
Definitely.
Possibly unemployable as well. Would you say that you kind of burn your bridges? I mean, for you, obviously, it's fine, but is that a worry of people aiming for fire, that if they burn the bridges, they're not going to be able to go back if it doesn't work out in a year or two's time or something?
I think I am employable. I think I would struggle to be like someone telling me what to do and to be in a certain place for 8 hours or however many hours a day. I like to think I haven't lost the skills. I just think my whole outlook and mindset has changed, that I've enjoyed the freedom that I've experienced. And I think I would find it hard to go back to not having as many freedoms. Although I like to think as well, I would find more joy in whatever I was doing, because I think I've learned that happiness is not a set of circumstances. It's your outlook and how you see the world.
Because I think one of the biggest fears people have is, I will get to financial independence, quit, and then what if I never make money again? And if you're smart enough to figure out tax law, investing, read stuff, like you will make money again if you want to.
You'll be fine.
You'll be fine. You can get a new job. You can do something. You can do a side hustle. There's always ways to do it if you want to. And actually, like the people that we've met who got to financial independence, like you can't just sit on a beach 24/7 and do nothing, sipping margaritas. You will get bored of that eventually. For me, it's about an hour. For other people, it maybe is a month or two longer. But like eventually you go, I actually need something in my life. And if you create something cool or do something, like eventually you will make some money by mistake, which I know people won't like hearing. They'll go, oh, it's all right for you. But you will. Like if you're smart and switched on to do this, like I guarantee you will be okay.
Do you think FIRE is a realistic or a desirable goal for most people, or is it just for this handful of weirdos? Like,
are you calling us weirdos?
Well, I'm in the same group, but
I think getting your finances in order is a realistic and desirable goal for everyone. But I think a lot of people might look at us and what we do and go like, well, I'm never going to get there. I might as well not even start and not even bother. And they don't realize there's all the steps in between, that even just, getting out of debt, of credit card debt, and knowing where your money's going every month, and like getting basic personal finances solid does so much. And like the peace of mind and knowing that you can survive a few months if you didn't have work. And it doesn't have to be about getting to financial independence. I think for us, and the way we want to help people, is for them to feel secure and not have to worry about money, because so many people do.
And you might not ever get to financial independence, but you could retire. Like you might not get to retire early, but you could get to the stage where you could retire well and comfortably and sort your finances out. And I had a lady email me today about the course and said, like, I'm already at state retirement age. Is this course good for me? And I was thinking, well, like learning how to manage your money, being good with finances, doesn't really matter whether you're 19, 25 or 73. You still have to operate in the global financial system. Like no one gets to not play the money game, unfortunately.
Especially now that they don't have the defined benefit pensions, or very few people do. And you have to look after yourself and do save for your own retirement.
Everyone's becoming investors.
You have to.
I think that's a really good point. I mean, it might even be that FIRE gets too much attention, when for most people it should be, just sort out that base level and your life will get better. Don't even worry about the big goal.
Plug the holes in the ship before you start even thinking about investing. Like make sure you know where your money's going. Make sure you know that you're out of expensive debt. Make sure that, you track your spending so you know what's going on. Those basics that most people don't do. And you're right, it would be so powerful if they did.
Can I just jump in, because we had a question in the chat. James wants to know, so you say you're a digital nomad. Does that mean you don't have a home? Does digital nomad mean not having a home?
For us, it does. We don't have a home. We just move from place to place. So we're currently in Vietnam and we'll be going to Japan in under a week. We're
coming hang out with Ben, and then we're gonna go to Nintendo World and the Ninja Restaurant, obviously. But we don't have a home. When we go back to the UK, we go and visit family and meet friends and do things like that. But we are homeless. We pay UK taxes. I would like to point out very quickly. Hello.
You're not that kind of nomad.
His Majesty's Revenue and Customs. We are paying our taxes and looking after everything.
How does that work then? Because don't you have to spend a minimum amount of days per year to be a tax resident or something like that?
Well, we're not a tax resident of anywhere else, and you have to be a tax resident of somewhere. We did stay in Germany for a while. And if you stay there for over 6 months, you just become a tax resident of Germany. And I was like, I do not want to be a tax resident of Germany. That's like the last thing I want. So you have to pay taxes somewhere. And actually, like, I'm happy contributing in the UK. I think like, well, whether you think the government is doing a good job or not, I'm kind of proud of the NHS and I'm proud of some of the things in the UK. So I want to, maybe we'll retire there, maybe we'll live there later on and come back. But at the moment, we just want to pay our taxes, and you have to be a tax resident of somewhere. You can't.
You can't opt out of everything then. You know, I'm going to spend a week in each country and we're all good.
I think you could before there was as much tracking. I think there were people who did that and just disappeared. Now there's all sorts of things like flag theory and the nomad capitalist, and you decide where you want to put your flag, which residency you want to get, which tax rates you want to pay, and it gets awfully confusing. And I think we could probably minimize our tax massively if we weren't in the UK. However, there are benefits. I like the UK. It's my home country. It's beautiful in the summer, not so great in January.
That's why you're in Vietnam.
Yeah. Did that answer the question, or did we completely dodge it, Daniel?
Yes, no. I think that was good. Thank you very much, and thank you, James, for the question. Ben, by the way, we are still switching on the stream.
Oh, really?
We're still switching, yeah, not pinned. So if we can't fix it, we'll just try and be quiet when we're not speaking, so it doesn't trigger the switch.
Okay, so
No
that's
speaking out of turn, Ben.
It's my fault. Sorry. What would you say you've learned from running the Rebel Finance School? Because I always find I learn more than I teach whenever I do stuff like that.
Oh, I had a thought about Zoom that might help you before we answer that question. If you do spotlight rather than pin, I think that might help.
Oh, okay.
See if it works.
Okay, so that puts you two in the spotlight, and we'll just be up here as our little thumbnails then.
Can we spotlight you as well?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, it's only one person. Oh, add spotlight. Oh, very clever. Very clever.
Little Zoom lesson as well as talking about Japan and money.
Have to add this to our program how-to list, won't we?
Yep, that's worked on the channel. That's really good.
You've also successfully dodged my question.
What have
I
we
love
learned?
your question.
I've retained it in my
What have
short
we learned
memory.
running Rebel Finance School? I think we learned a huge amount in Debt Week because we asked for case studies, and like 30 odd people came forward and said, I've got a huge amount of debt. Can you help me? And we learned a huge amount. And I think one of the things is when people write to us about their situations, it's in story format. So they write paragraphs and paragraphs of this happened to me, and then I got this credit card, and then I got this credit card. Nowhere does it reference what the interest rate is. Nowhere is there a nice, neat table to know exactly what it is. And I think people really genuinely don't understand their financial situation. And if we could just help people take their finances and put it into a simple table of liabilities and assets and do some net worth spreadsheeting, it makes such a difference. Then you'd know which order to pay the debts down. You'd know there's so much you can learn from doing that.
Yeah, I think people's thinking is very muddled around finances, and that's generally why they have the outcomes that they do, which is that their finances are muddled as well as the way that they're thinking about it. And Alan's right, like no one thinks in that clear format of like, okay, I have these debts, this is the interest rate, this is the balance. And I think people probably don't necessarily want to do that as well, because
Let's not look.
like I don't want to know what it's, because it's potentially bad. And then we do have it on the flip side as well, that people go off and like figure out their net worth, and it's more than they thought it was. So it does work both ways. Yeah, I think people are just a bit scared to peek behind the curtain.
The curtains. Yeah.
So the value of a financial planner is not necessarily just the advice, but also just sorting everything out and giving clarity, I suppose.
Are we allowed to bash financial advisors?
Well, there are good and bad, aren't
Are there?
there? There must
I think-
be. Reassure the audience, please.
Reassure the audience. Well, I think like it's interesting because like it depends who you go and see. Our philosophy is definitely along the lines of simple index investing is the easiest approach for nearly everyone. And like the financial advisors, if you go and see them, they talk to you about your risk profile and your risk tolerance. I think that actually confuses a lot of people more than it does actually help people. And they're not even talking about risk, they're talking about volatility and your resilience to volatility. So the whole finance industry has risk and volatility confused in what they're saying. Risk of losing money versus volatility of does it go up and down? And the risk profile deals with, can you deal with it going up and down? Because they worry you're going to sell it when it crashes instead of going for the long term. So I don't know. I think financial advisors can actually cause damage by taking people through the simple processes that they are taught with this risk profile stuff. And then you make up, you know, what percentage bonds or what percentage this. And they did exactly that with Katie. That was the first thing they did with Katie when she started investing.
Yeah, I was sitting at my desk one day. I worked for Deloitte and I'm minding my own business, and my phone rang, and I was like, "Oh, I'm very important." My phone's rang, so I was like, "Katie Donegan," and it was a financial advisor, and he was like, "Have you thought about investing your money? You know, you start earning good money now. You're working, you know, big four accountancy firm. Have you thought about investing?" And I was like, "Well, yes, I have. Tell me what to do. How does it work?" And this was before I knew anything about index investing, about financial independence, and he got me to fill in this risk tolerance questionnaire. And I came out as very cautious because I am quite a cautious person. So he put me heavily into bonds, and I was in my 20s. Because I said I was cautious and I didn't really want to lose money, not understanding, you know, if you're in it for decades, you'll be fine. So I had a cautiously managed fund, which I think was at least 50% bonds.
We did the sums, and that one thing, if we hadn't have learned other things and we'd stuck with it for a few years, it would have cost us £330,000. We wouldn't have been FI if we'd have stuck with his advice. So we're fairly strongly against all that financial advisor stuff.
We've got the shark version of that here in Japan. Kind of unregulated. Basically they flog products that aren't legal in most of the world, like offshore kind of insurance rapid fund things with, you know, 8 layers of fees, and, you know, total fees are like 6% a year kind of thing, and, you know, like just evil stuff.
Wow.
And not really regulated because they're kind of outside of Japanese society. So
Okay.
So that's worse.
That's
yeah,
worse.
But I think yeah, anyone who's doing financial advice or, you know, planning or helping has to start with education, right? So you got to start with, you know, let's give you some books that are going to help you, kind of thing. Yeah, I find I work with clients sometimes just as a coach, and the heartbreaking one are people who are, you know, okay, I'm 67 and I haven't got any savings and I haven't prepared in any way. What can I do? And that's always the hard conversation, because you're like, okay, you haven't really got any human capital left either. So let's cut the budget and save more and try not to get sick.
And the state pension here is worse than the UK, I think, isn't it?
Oh yeah, much lower. So
is it?
Yeah. Actually, everyone here is excited about paying into the UK state pension on a voluntary basis, which I don't know if you're aware of this, but it's an unbelievable deal.
Yes.
I think it's an unintended loophole, maybe, because it's I think you pay £5,000 and you get a £9,000 a year pension. So
it's crazy, isn't it? It's absolutely
Can I
crazy.
do that?
Yes, you are doing it. We paid a lot more than that through national insurance and all that stuff, because if you're actually working in the UK,
yeah, you actually pay quite a lot, don't you? But
yes, but then when you finish like formally working, you can just do top-ups, as you said, and it is actually for most people an incredible deal. If you're listening to this, Rishi Sunak, please forget you ever heard it.
It has been suggested a couple of times, hasn't it? They've tried to scrap Class 2 contributions at least twice, I think, that I know of, but it hasn't gone through yet. So if you're listening and you're not paying into the UK state pension, then look into doing so, because it is such a good deal.
And there's a video on the Retire Japan channel about that.
There is there?
Link in the description.
Yeah, we better do that actually.
Oh,
We've
yeah.
not been good at that, but we'll try and remember.
So one of the things we heard about Japan was the like working culture of working incredibly hard and then just kind of dropping. Like, is that true about the working hard culture? Does Japan work harder than America? You get 6 weeks holiday if you work for some kind of companies, and you get 4 weeks basic holiday. And I feel like there's a fairly moderate working culture in the UK. So it's interesting.
Do you want to do this one, Daniel?
Yeah, so just before the stream started, I was talking about living in Japan. I've been here 20 years and generally it's been very good, but there was one kind of tough time, and that was when our son was about four or five at the time, and I worked, no, he was younger than that, but we lived in the south of Japan in quite a rural area. I'm a programmer by trade, and so I managed to find a local sort of computer consultancy place. There weren't many, so I worked there. Because it's the middle of nowhere, the wages were very cheap, although the wages are generally low in Japan anyway, and they haven't gone up over the past 10, 15 or so years to keep up with the rest of the country. In fact, if you go and buy a digital product on Gumroad or something, very often you'll get, is it PPP or something they call it?
Yeah.
Something pricing.
And they do variable pricing now. So if you live in a lower income country, you get a cheaper price. And
Oh, wow.
they just introduced it recently.
And generally it's about 20% less for Japan because it's no longer at the level of other developed countries. Anyway, yeah, so it was just very tough, struggling with a very low salary. And then the salary I got didn't seem to match up with what was on the job post. And it turns out there's this thing called the base salary, and then there's the additional stuff on top. And the base salary is used to calculate all the extra, your bonus and stuff like that. So they make the base salary as low as possible. And then the extra stuff is all based on overtime, basically. And yeah, you get the chime to, leave your desk at 12 o'clock, be back by 1, all that stuff. But then the chime for 5 or 6 o'clock when work finishes is just like, it's like background music, and everyone just carries working. And I always used to try and make it home for dinner with my little family by about 8 o'clock. And I felt guilty every day leaving so early from the office because they'd be there till midnight or whatever.
Till midnight.
Tough. Yeah. And then they wanted to introduce Saturday working, and I said I couldn't because I take my son swimming, and that was quite frowned upon. That's not a good reason. Yeah. And then at the time I was also doing martial arts, and my martial arts teacher, when I finished down there and we got a job up in Tokyo, he said, good luck up in Tokyo, and by the way, work comes first, family comes second. Okay. I'll remember
That's
that.
you told.
Yeah.
So yeah,
is that what
I'd maybe
people
say
do
that.
then?
Yeah, sorry.
Is that sort of accepted as that is the culture? Do people resent it? Or do people that have grown up in the Japanese culture, like,
Just
that's
accepted.
the way it is? Or, is there any kind of like rebellion against that and people resent it? Or they're just like, okay, yeah, you're right. Like work comes first.
The Japanese sort of culture encourages like putting up with things. And so not everybody does, you get your rebels, but generally that's the way it is. That's the way we do it. And in return, the company will give you a nice pension and just sort of look after you. And I think, my wife's brother, we were talking about him the other day. He's been at the company since he graduated, and, no risk of ever being laid off or fired, and he'll get a pension. And in return, he sort of gives his life work to them. So it's kind of like, yeah, that's the way it is.
Yeah, I'd say people don't work hard so much as work long.
Oh yeah.
The productivity of labor is quite low in Japan compared to other countries. So there's this low productivity. So people just work stupidly long hours instead. And they're not necessarily getting stuff done. They're just sitting there and showing that they're still at work, kind of thing. Not all in a lot of times, I think. So
you agree things are changing though, Ben?
Slightly. I mean, there's more foreign companies. So working for a foreign company is very desirable because the wages tend to be higher and the working conditions tend to be better. And younger people are a bit less willing to put up with it. But it's still, wages are low here compared to most places. Cost of living is also low. So, just an example, I came here 23 years ago. And I don't really feel like prices have increased in that time. You know,
Wow.
wages haven't really increased either. But in the UK, prices have like doubled or tripled, right? Or Australia's like 5 times or whatever. So Japan has gone from expensive when I got here to really quite cheap now. Like leaving Japan is painful. So we went to Canada last year and I was like, oh my God, I can't afford to do anything because it's so expensive compared to Japan. So even Thailand. So I used to go to Thailand and it was super cheap, right?
Yes.
But it's gone up. So now it's no longer super cheap compared to Japan. It's slightly cheaper. So it's like, okay, so give it a few more years and Japan's going to be the cheap place in Asia. So
Interesting, because Thailand.
you're going to have a very nice trip when you get here.
Yeah. Which is also kind of a problem because although it's good if you're living here and especially if you're on a foreign salary, but from the country's point of view, the population is dropping like crazy and it's really hard to encourage people to come here now because your salary is going to be really low when you get here.
Wow.
Bit of a quandary at the moment.
Yes. Yeah. And the thing you've just mentioned about different countries is definitely something we've thought about, that term of geo arbitrage, where you can buy something in one country and it costs X and you can buy it cheaper in the next country if you use your currency. And Thailand feels more expensive to us this last time we went in January. And then we just come to Vietnam and that feels like people are giving away the food at breakfast. You kind of feel a bit guilty, like you should pay a bit more.
Can I pay double? Would that be okay?
But yeah, it's particularly inexpensive in Da Nang in Vietnam on the beach. And the food is great. It's wonderful. But it is interesting as you travel around the world, certain countries like Uruguay, was not expecting Uruguay to be as expensive as the UK.
Was it? Oh.
I was shocked by that. And then you go to Argentina next door and it was so cheap. It was unbelievably inexpensive. So it's really interesting as you move around the world, the different like levels and what your currency can actually buy you. And a breakfast can cost anywhere from £10 to like 60 or 80 if you go to America or California or New York.
The way that we have breakfast.
Yeah.
Nice.
This is a good caveat.
Speaking of sticking with the digital nomad theme, we've had a follow-up question from James actually. So how do people who are digital nomads deal with schooling if they have children?
So we do not have kids. However, there are a huge amount of people that do. And what we've read about and heard about is the world schooling movement. So there is an entire movement about educating your kids as you travel around the world. There's like materials that are posted online, and entire sets of teachers. And if you're going to learn about the Roman Empire, why not go to Italy and go to the Colosseum and learn whilst you're there? Or if you're going to learn about Greece and the history there, why not go and learn about Stoicism and the different bits whilst you're actually there? So I think there's an entire movement, and the world has definitely shifted since COVID, and it's becoming more and more fluid with jobs going online. But there's no reason why you can't do that. I think at some stage, like you might want to settle down and you might see it as periods, but some people do world schooling with kids and travel for good.
That sounds so cool, going to the place to learn about the history of that. Wow.
I think it's going to make more of an impact, isn't it? You're certainly going to remember it better. Like,
yes.
I think so, especially if you then get someone to dress up as a Roman legionnaire with a sword
and chase them around.
I'm going to start talking about toga parties and stuff.
That was the Greek version. Daniel doesn't know what to say after that.
I'm leaving it to bed.
Staring into the middle distance going, I'm not sure where this conversation is going now.
If I cover
Were
my
we
eyes,
talking about
they might
finance?
not know when they're...
Yeah.
I hope we've answered your question, James. Thank you very much for that.
Pull us back then.
What are you planning to do in Japan then? So we're talking about travel.
We're very excited. So we start off in Tokyo, and we're speaking at the Invest from Japan Club. We're going to a Toastmasters meeting, and I'm doing a presenting skills workshop. That's all organised with Nick from the group. Then we're coming to Sendai to see you, Ben. You can't get rid of us now.
Yes, yes.
You did make me laugh when I said, do many random strangers come to Sendai to visit you?
No, they do not.
The answer is no.
The answer is no. No.
It's hard enough getting my family to come to Sendai to visit me. So
Well, we're
random
coming.
strangers is a bonus.
And we're going to go to Nintendo World in Osaka, go to the Ninja restaurant in Tokyo, and we've got 2 weeks in Osaka. We've got a month in Japan in total, hanging out. And then we're off to South Korea afterwards to go to the spas and eat barbecue food.
Nice.
Yeah, but we're very excited about Japan. I think all of our friends have said we'll love it. I've never been. I'm curious. This is our big Asia trip. We've not really traveled that much around Asia till this year.
Okay. I think Japan to visit is incredible. Like, it's, people are friendly and polite. It's clean. It's safe. There's amazing food. It's fairly reasonable, especially at the moment with the cheap yen. So it's an amazing place to be a tourist, I think.
And since the 2020 Olympics, leading up to that, they put quite a lot of effort into signage, especially in Tokyo,
Okay.
Which I found is a lot better.
Yeah, we are super excited to come and hang out with you all. And hopefully we'll meet a lot of your listeners at the meetups from the group and the different places. And we don't.
And now they know what you look like. So as you're walking around.
I hope so. That would be really cool. We were spotted in Mexico after doing a YouTube live. Someone just walked past the restaurant and went, "It's you." And then it happened in Thailand in a vegetarian restaurant. I was just chatting to friends. Someone on the table next to me goes, "I recognize your voice. Do you have a podcast?" I was like,
They thought you were.
yes. They thought I was my business partner, Simon, but that's minor details.
What should we know about Japanese culture? Are there any things that we could potentially get ourselves in a pickle by doing something inappropriate? Like, what should we know?
Not really. Like, I just be aware of your surroundings and what people are doing around you, and kind of do similar things. Like, but the main things, like having the right kind of volume for public places and stuff. Like, like people don't really speak on trains here very much. So, to have a loud conversation on a train is kind of jarring. That it's just stuff like that. And I mean, no one's gonna you're not gonna get in trouble.
If you go into
trying now.
If you go into a restaurant and the floor is raised, you might have to take your shoes off. That would be a bit of a fight part to walk around.
Anytime there's a change of elevation on the floor, look around and see if there's slippers and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, we've definitely got used to slippers in Vietnam and Thailand and changing shoes. Yeah, there is a lot of that. I do quite like it, although it's quite weird having different slippers for each room of the house. I'm not quite used to that yet.
Yeah, the toilet slippers.
Yes. I'm like, why is this needed?
Yeah. Bowing. It's a cliche, but lots of bowing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you probably don't want to overdo that either. It's kind of like
nodding.
Yeah, you kind of nod back is enough.
Okay.
You don't want to do exaggerated bows back because it's probably not that kind of relationship, And masks are still quite a thing around. So the government removed their advice to wear masks, except if you're in a crowded place and that kind of thing. So, but I think most of the population is still kind of wearing a mask in public. So kind of look around and see how things are going is how I'd handle that.
I don't know about where you are, Ben, but actually paying with cash as well is still a thing in some places where credit card is either not accepted. My wife found a place today that wasn't accepted, or above like 3,000 yen or something only.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't. Yeah, it's a good idea to have some cash, I think. And then a credit card, or I guess, yeah, you guys haven't got all the little pay things. Japan has like 20 different little pay apps that only really work in Japan.
Okay.
Sounds like America, where they just go, Venmo me it. And I'm like, what is Venmo? And then I had to Google it, and it doesn't work for anyone outside America.
Yeah. Same kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's the biggest thing we can give to your audience or help your audience that are listening, watching? Or is it just James, Daniel? Is it just us and James hanging out?
No, ex-chapter, I'm trying to think of what that's short for. Okay. Has a question as well. And first of all, James has another tip for you. Don't talk loudly anywhere except in izakaya, except in a bar. We can tell where James hangs out. So the question from ex-chapter is, as seasoned nomads, any travel planning tips when dealing with a weakened currency? Am I likely canning my summer US trip as unaffordable due to high ticket prices plus the weak yen? So he's thinking of his point of view from somebody from a little weakened currency country like Japan going to somewhere more expensive like the US.
We can actually reflect on that quite nicely because, well, quite badly. It was painful. Liz Truss, our ex-Prime Minister, managed to crash our currency right before we went to America. So the pound to the dollar was almost parity, and they'd had a lot of inflation and things were super expensive. And it was one of the most expensive trips we've ever done in our life. And we were just absolutely screwed by poor timing on the currencies. And she did it just as we were paying for the trip.
I thought you were about to say she did it just to annoy us.
No, I don't think she did. I mean, like, yeah, but we lost thousands on that front. So I think it can make a huge difference.
You can be nomadic within your own country. You could take the opportunity to travel around Japan and explore there as well. And take that opportunity whilst you wait for things to rebalance or for the yen to get stronger or other currencies to get weaker. It's probably not what you want to hear.
No, I think that's a good tip. Yeah, so he's saying that he's considering sort of scrapping the trip completely. So you could treat an internal trip as a trial run almost, as a practice.
Well, yeah, or you can be nomadic within your own country. Plenty of people do it in the States, for example, you know, the van life, and they travel around their own country.
Oh, yeah.
There's also one thought I had is there's always a less expensive country, which I know that stops at some point, but it feels like there always is. We went to Colombia and it was unbelievably inexpensive for us. And we made friends with lots of Colombians. We were helping them to invest, figuring out how to do that. And we asked them, like, where do you go on holiday? And they went to Argentina because it was even cheaper. And Argentina to us was like, whoa. We went to like Michelin-starred restaurant round the corner by mistake, and it was sort of $20 for the most amazing Michelin-starred restaurant meal that we'd ever had in our lives. And I think like the States might be expensive, and it is expensive at the moment, like it is crazy, but there are other countries that you could go to that will equally have fun around the world and could be a third of the price, if not less. So maybe you have to change a little bit. And we've just had this. We've been looking at going to Berlin, and we really want to go to Berlin. We loved Berlin last time we went. We looked on Airbnb, and apartments were £4,000 to £6,000 a month, which is insane. It's like $8,000 plus. And then we were looking at other things, and it just wasn't working. Like, we just need to change our plans. So we're not going to Berlin, even though we wanted to, but we will have fun wherever we end up. And you can find cool countries with inexpensive prices. They are available to you. I don't know if that helps at all, but there's always a cheaper country.
Yeah.
I think that's an important principle in anything, isn't it? Like, just to be aware of alternatives and not get too fixated on one thing.
Yes. One brand, one thing, one particular vegetable or fruits that you have to buy. Well, you know what it's like.
A bizarre example.
I
must have carrots.
There's certain vegetables that become particularly expensive, and then you could just go to an alternate vegetable, a substitute vegetable.
Parsnips. There are no parsnips in Japan.
We'll bring
and
some.
I really miss parsnips. So.
Well, you probably can't.
Some in Vietnam.
You probably can't import.
Bring you some neeps and tatties.
No, customs are not going to like that.
Yeah, you'll get locked up and won't make it to Sendai.
Neeps are turnips, not parsnips.
Sorry,
Alan.
Moving on, I think that's
Moving
very
on.
helpful. I hope that's helped you, ex-chapter. And-
Daniel doesn't like parsnips.
Oh, I love parsnips, yeah, but I've forgotten what they taste like. We have Angie has a question. How do nomads deal with healthcare, especially yearly checks and prescriptions? I know we were sort of veering away from the finance side here, but people seem to be very interested in your overall the lifestyle you've enabled yourselves to have. So yearly checks and subscriptions, how do you deal with that?
We've done them around the world. So we had our blood work done in Colombia and do like a checkup there.
And it was way more thorough than anything you would get like as standard on the NHS. I went for my 40th thing at the NHS and they were like, what's your blood pressure and what's your BMI? Oh, you're a bit overweight, goodbye. And that's basically my entire check. And then you go to Colombia and like you pay £100 and you have every blood test known to man. And it's actually, it can be cheaper and better quality healthcare as you travel around the world, depending on which country you go to. Do not go to America and try and buy healthcare.
In terms of prescriptions, we're quite lucky we don't have any kind of regular prescriptions. I sometimes have sensitive skin, and like people have sensitive skin around the world, so you'll always, you'll find things in the country that you're in, because we're all humans and we all have similar health things, and often, I mean, Mexico, you can get anything without a prescription, so and weird and wonderful things are like, do you require these anabolic steroids when you're buying your toothpaste at the local pharmacy?
Human growth hormone with your soap. It's like,
they whip out the list from under the counter and are like, I just came in for some toothpaste. Do you require Viagra, human growth hormone, anabolic steroids, all sorts?
Yeah. But like answering the question a little bit more, we do have insurance. So we had health insurance, travel insurance, the insurances. There is a couple of digital nomad type insurances now that will work all around the world. And there's one price for the world and then one price for the world plus America, because it's so ridiculously expensive. So you can get those. Safety Wings was the one we used for quite some time. So there are ways to do it and get insurance and travel, and actually like healthcare in different countries is phenomenal. The doctors in Colombia were amazing. The ones in Mexico were phenomenal and looked after us. Yeah, I don't think we should be too scared of doctors in different countries. Like, they train really well. They want to care for you, and it does not cost very much.
So maybe it links with what you were saying earlier. There's always a cheaper country. If you know you've got something in advance, like you want to have a blood checkup or whatever, wait till you're in, or sort of plan ahead so that you're in a reasonable country to do that.
Yes.
Which medical tourism is a huge thing. Like half the population of the UK go to Poland to get their teeth done. The same with the Americans. The Americans travel to Mexico to get lots of their work done. Medical tourism is a huge thing around the world.
Thailand's is a big one. Like, all the fancy hospitals are basically for foreigners who had traveled there to have surgery or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, to have X procedure or looked after. It's really interesting how the world is changing and shifting, and that healthcare are businesses as well. They want to earn money from different currencies that are more valuable.
Well, the chat says thank you. They're very happy with the useful information. So thank you. And
thank you, Andrea, in chat. Yes.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much, guys. I think we've probably wrung out as much as we can about the nomad lifestyle from you. And it's kind of dinner time, isn't it? You're 2 hours
hungry,
before us. So here in Japan, it's 9:15, but you're 7:15.
Yes,
I believe. Yes. Awesome. All right. Well, I'll be seeing you in 2 weeks' time.
We're excited.
Exactly. And yeah, have a really good trip. Have a safe trip. Make sure you check out all the entry procedure stuff because it's quite fiddly for Japan. And if you've got the right apps and the right barcodes and stuff, you can walk through. And if you don't, then you're in a queue for 2 hours. So
Yeah,
just
before
make
you
sure you.
Yeah,
I believe we've done them, but I'll double check.
we will double check, and no Vicks vapor rub. We are aware.
Okay. Yeah, they do seize upon random medications and dislike them sometimes. So
Yeah, we are very excited to come to Japan, and thank you to everyone who's listening. If we could tell you one thing about finance, it would be, like, if you can get your finances in order, it gives you freedom and opportunity to do what you actually want to do. So read the Retire Japan blog, watch the videos, work on your finances, because the freedom and opportunity you can get by getting on top of your finances is unbelievable.
it's life transforming, isn't it? So it doesn't make you happy, but it takes away all the unhappiness that comes from not having enough money and stuff. So
Then you can work on your happiness afterwards.
yeah, I'm gonna have to talk to you about that. Brilliant. All right, thanks guys. I'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Happy
Thanks for
traveling.
having us on.
Cheers.
Bye.
All right. Oh, we're gonna carry on after this.
It says we're still live.
Yeah.
Oh,
No,
we're carrying on. We are meant to leave. Okay.
Yes.
Oh, goodbye.
Okay, actually, goodbye. Okay, I didn't know if we were all leaving. Okay, we will actually leave. Bye.
Cool. Cheers. All right. So that went on much longer than I thought. Wow. Fantastic.
It was good though. Yeah, it really seems to be interesting, the digital nomad sort of lifestyle, doesn't there? And the different sort of everyday things that you think, well, how do they get over that then? How do you cope with that challenge?
Yeah, the insurance is an interesting one because a lot of insurance you can't get for more than, a certain number of weeks or months. So if you're going to be on the road for 2 years or 5 years or something, then you're going to have to find some kind of specialized products or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Cool. Nice. So we're going to post links to the meetups. So Alan and Katie are going to be at a couple of meetups, I think, one in Tokyo, one in Osaka, maybe. And they're going to be running their Rebel Finance School in the summer, which is great. I actually attended it last year. And
you do a quick
free.
online summary of it. What is it?
So yeah, they do this online kind of finance school, basically. Kind of a few sessions. I think there were 6 sessions, maybe, and they're really long. They're like marathon sessions where they present all the information and then they sit there answering questions for 2 hours afterwards. It's pretty cool. Yeah, it's a really cool concept. They execute it really well. I think they've done 4 or 5 of them now. So
yeah, so
really
put a link to that in the description. That sounds very good.
Yeah, well, once it's announced, I'll announce it on Retire Japan. I don't think they've got the details quite yet, but
okay, right.
Starting in the summer, and it's I guess they'll be running it from the UK, so it might be an awkward time, but they do recordings as well. So if you can't go to the live one,
yeah,
awesome.
Before we jump into the news, we had a couple of extra questions just as they were leaving, but we're good to answer these. So is that okay just to cover these first?
Yeah, definitely.
The first is James again, and it's very simple. Ben Tanaka and Chris Broad collaboration? Question mark.
I'm not fit to wipe his shoe kind of shine kind of stuff. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, he apparently lives in Sendai, although I've never actually seen him around. We have some common friends, like some of my jiu-jitsu guys know him, I think. I'd love to do a video with Chris, or even just hang out with Chris, sort out his finances for him. So yeah, that would be great if it came to be.
Yeah,
I think he's in Nagasaki now. He's doing some cycle thing again. So
right, yeah,
he's always jet setting around the place. So.
So the second one is an interesting one from Tim, who is a US citizen, and it sounds like he's still living in the US, but considering coming to Japan. So He's a US citizen, and almost all of his income is rental income, and eventually it will be US Social Security. Thinking of coming to Japan, his question is, if I were to live in Japan, what Japanese income taxes and rates would I pay? That's a good one for you.
So this is somewhat complicated.
Because of Japan or because he's US citizen?
Both. So just looking at Japan, so the first 5 years you're in Japan, you're not yet permanently tax resident. So during that first 5 years, you have to pay tax on Japanese income, and you have to pay tax on foreign income if you bring it to Japan. So if
Keep
you
it in a US bank account, you don't have to pay tax on it in Japan.
So with your rental income, as long as you didn't bring any of that money to Japan, Japan wouldn't tax it. But the moment you did bring any money across, then they would consider that to be your income, and that would be taxed accordingly. Now, the good news is that Japanese income tax is probably higher than the US. I'm not sure. Probably depends on the state, but it's not that high for like a normal kind of income. So you've got various deductions, kind of your basic deduction and so on. So you've probably got about 1 million yen's worth of income that's tax-free at the start, and then it goes in bands. So you pay 5% on the first 1 million yen beyond that, and then maybe 10% on the next one. And I think it's 15 or 20, and then 33, and then 40. And I think the top rate of tax is 45, but you have to be earning quite a lot to hit that. So yeah, it's a bit complicated. There's a website by the tax office that shows the bands and we can put that in the description, I think, if that would be helpful.
Yeah. By the way, the 1 million yen you mentioned, if you're in the US, that's about $7,500
at the current exchange rate.
Yeah. Yes.
And of course, coming from the US, like the cost of living in Japan is much lower. So everything's going to be cheaper. Food, especially accommodation. So accommodation in Japan, like rents and buying, if you wanted to buy a home or if you wanted to rent somewhere, it's going to be a fraction of what you'd pay in most of the US, I think. So you'll find, especially at the moment with the cheap yen, your dollars are going to go much further than they would if you were in the US. Yeah,
that's a big thing, isn't it, for me? That when I went to the US last year, that really hit. And of course, having to pay tips everywhere as well. Goodness me. You don't get that in Japan. You don't have to pay tips, and that saves a lot.
Yeah, you go to a restaurant and it's like, okay, $20, I can kind of pay that. And they're like, oh, okay, so it's 20% on top of that. So, yeah. And then tax as well, right? So
yes, that's true. Yeah, depends.
Yeah, so in Japan, you basically pay the price on the thing, and that price is going to be about half what it is in the US anyway. So
yeah. So Tim says thank you for that information. Incidentally, his US dollar income would be about $100,000. So sort of within the sort of reasonable range, I think, isn't he, in terms of Japanese income tax?
So what, that'd be about 13 million yen. That's getting high. I mean, for in terms of average salaries,
it's higher.
The average salary is probably 4 or 5 million. So you're kind of 2 or 3 times the average salary in Japan. So you're gonna be able to live quite well on that. But you will be taxed if you brought it all over. So
good. Thank you for the question, Tim. Thank you, Ben.
Excellent.
Yeah, so we're good to go on to the news now, I think.
Let's go on to the news.
Yeah.
So the first news story. This is a travesty, I think. So basically, there were several newspaper articles a couple of weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. I think I noticed this story, and basically there was a woman, I think, somewhere. So she was a Japanese woman, and her husband died, and because of that, she was going to receive his pension, right, as a survivor. So he had a foreign pension because he worked abroad, and so she'd be getting his pension going forward. And the tax office, for some reason, decided that she would have to pay tax on the entire projected earnings of that pension until they kind of calculated for as long as she would live, kind of thing. So she had to pay tax on like 20 years of pension that she hadn't received yet. And that's just absolutely crazy. Like, it doesn't pass the common sense test, right? If you asked anyone, does that make sense? They'd say no, right? Obviously, she hasn't got the money. She could die next year and not get any of the. It's just weird thing. So she sued them. She's gone to court, and there's a couple of other people in the same situation that have joined her, I think, in that lawsuit. And I hope they win, because it's just ridiculous. So. Yeah, I mean, the common sense thing would be say, okay, so you're getting a pension, we'll tax you each year based on what you receive for the pension, rather than saying, okay, so we think you're going to live for 20 years. So based on that, give us 20 years worth of tax now.
Yeah, it's outrageous.
That was crazy.
It's quite, I would think it's a relatively unusual situation. It's not going to affect too many people, but why is it?
No, I mean, a survivor pension, you know, all that is required is that you have a spouse that dies and you know, had the right to get a pension that you would then get. Yeah. So I hope they sort it out. Yeah,
I'm surprised it's coming up now. I would have thought in that case it would have been something that has been happening for a long time and people have just been ignoring it, or is it something that they've introduced, a rule they've just started trying to introduce?
It sounds more like an interpretation than a rule. Especially because Japan does have survivor pensions. So if your spouse dies under certain circumstances, you can get some of their pension that they would have got. And that is not treated in that way. That is treated the way you'd think it might be, as in you pay tax every year on what you receive. So yeah, it's just kind of crazy. On a happier note, so we have all the bank crises at the moment, right? So you got the US, the Silicon Valley Bank went under through a combination of bad luck and kind of slightly, how would we call it? They were trying to make money without being cautious about how they were making money.
Yeah.
So they
I heard it still wasn't as bad as like pre-2008. They'd have sort of stricter regulations to adhere to since then. But even so, it still wasn't enough.
Yeah, well, I mean, Donald Trump cancelled a lot of those in 2018, apparently. So they got rid of a lot of the banking regulations. I
didn't know that.
And the main thing was just the interest rates got away from their portfolio, and then all their customers tried to take the money out at once.
yeah.
But that seems to be spreading. So we've had a few more banks in the US that kind of looking, and then Credit Suisse was like bailed out by the Swiss government, I think. So people were worried about Japanese banks. So what would happen if a Japanese bank got into trouble? Would your money be safe? How does that work? And we did some looking into it, and apparently there's two types of bank accounts. So there is a normal bank account, and there is a different kind of bank account that pays no interest, but that is guaranteed unlimited. So there's an unlimited guarantee on those types of bank accounts. For a normal bank account, up to 10 million yen is guaranteed by the government. So if you have less than 10 million yen in your bank and the bank goes bust and something, your money is guaranteed by the Japanese government, and you'll get your money back, basically.
Might not be straight away, but
it might take a while. And if you have more than 10 million yen, the advice is to have accounts with different banks. So not different branches, but different banks. And then each of those would be guaranteed up to 10 million yen.
Is that the same for, no, probably isn't, for investment companies like SBI, Shoken, Rakuten?
Yeah, so the way brokers work is that they have to hold client assets separately. So they hold them with a third party. So all your shares are kind of somewhere else, basically. And I think you're also guaranteed up to 10 million yen if something were to happen to the broker. Not obviously if you made a bad investment decision, but yeah.
Okay.
But I think that the fact that your assets are ring fenced means that it should be okay. Lots of people worried about Rakuten because Rakuten, the investment fund, had some big losses this year. But I don't think that's going to materially affect Rakuten Securities, the broker. I've still got all my stuff with Rakuten, so I'm not too bothered. Although I am planning to open my new NISA account with Monex.
Oh, really?
To diversify. So I figured the new NISA, it's a clean break. It's got nothing to do with the old NISA. So I'm just going to put all my new NISA stuff into a separate broker just for that tiny chance of my account gets hacked, or the broker has some issue or computer problems or whatever, just so you've got access to one of those.
Okay, not that you've got anything back then, you just want to diversify for sort of security.
Yeah, I mean, given that it's a new account, it's going to be starting from scratch, then I thought it was a good chance to diversify. But I'm very paranoid, so I mean, if you're less paranoid, you might be okay with just the one broker. If you're slightly paranoid like me, then you might be happier having two, and that's perfectly fine. I would recommend keeping all your taxable accounts with the same broker though, because they rebalance them. So if you've got tax deducting accounts with separate brokers, they're not going to talk to each other. So if you make a loss here and a gain here, they won't be cancelled out if they're at different brokers. So I think you want to keep your taxable accounts together, and then maybe you could have iDeCo somewhere else, or maybe you could have the new NISA somewhere else, and that would be fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to do my own taxes, and this year I realized that SBI Shogen investment brokers has an XML file that you can just upload directly into the tax form, and it automatically calculates any profit or loss on your shares. It was really nice.
Very nice. I mean, the online taxes are getting really easy now, aren't they?
It's getting much better, yeah.
So I did mine this year for the first time online, and it pulled in my health spending, which was pretty cool. So, up till now, if you spend more than 100,000 yen on health spending out of pocket, you can get a tax deduction for the excess over 100,000, but you had to keep receipts. Yeah. And you had to make this Excel file with which hospital and how much, and that took hours. But now it seems like it's just going to pull in the information automatically.
If you have it all on one.
As long as you've linked your My Number card to your health, which was a condition for getting some of those points this year. So I think most people have done it to get the points. But it means it's going to be much easier to do your taxes if you want to. Mm-hmm. Although you do have to scan your app thing about 400 times. Like every time you try and log into the tax system, you have to scan your My Number card again and do all that stuff.
I still print mine out and take it by hand, but because it's all sort of really smooth up to then, it still takes no time. There's a queue of one person in front of me, I hand it over and there's the stuff, and then 2 minutes, get the stamp, thank you very much, you're done. So.
Is that because you want the paper trail?
Yeah, I just don't have confidence in myself yet. I like having a person there who can see, yes.
Oh, they check it, do they?
On the face of it, well, they don't know in detail, but they just check that all the pages are there and the accompanying paperwork is there. So I've not made any big mistakes.
Okay. Yeah, because doing it online, it's they make you, well, they heavily suggest you print it out. Mm-hmm. And then you send it in, and it's all done. I got my refund a couple of days ago. So,
congratulations!
14,000 yen. Oh yes, it's the right amount of. You don't want a big refund because it's kind of a waste, but small amount. Perfect.
Well done, you.
Cool. So we were going to talk about the last one was this DIY will thing, wasn't it? There's a really good Reddit thread about making a will. And basically in Japan, there's 3 ways to make a will. You can handwrite it yourself at home and stick it in the drawer. Obviously that's cheap and quick, so it's free. Yeah, so you're allowed to just do it. You have to handwrite it, and you have to look online and make sure you get the language right and all that. So there's a slight risk in that if you write it wrong, it won't be valid. But that's the cheap option. And then there's the reasonable option, which is to go to a notary and do it there. So there's like a public notary office, and then they will store the will for you so that you write it with them. They check it, they make sure it's okay, they store it, and you pay a fee for that.
Would that be in the city hall or somewhere? Where would you go and find a notary?
Oh yeah, it's going to be in a public office somewhere. I haven't done this yet, but I need to. And then the last one is to go through a lawyer, and that can be very expensive in Japan. I've actually heard that sometimes lawyers charge a percentage of the estate. So it's like, okay, maybe I'll just do the notary one, maybe. Yeah, because I realized actually that I'm, were my wife and I to die at the same time, I think my assets would go to the Japanese government now, because I don't have any legal heirs other than my wife. So if you don't have a will and you don't have grandparents, parents, sibling, children, then your assets would just go to the state unless you make a will. So if you're in that situation, definitely make a will. And it's probably worth making a will anyway, just to, make sure that you have decided what you want to happen. And then the other thing is obviously to make a list of assets. And when you write a will, you actually have to do that. So you have to be like, this property at this address and this bank and this bank and so on. So
it's good just for sort of sorting things out in your own head, I think, isn't it?
It's more for, for people left behind. So it's common to lose track of bank accounts, for example.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah.
So if you didn't know that, grandpa has a bank account here, that bank account will just go dormant and you'll never get the money, right? So.
Yeah. Incidentally, so we will post a link to the Reddit thread in the description, but I think the person that did it said it cost about 3,000 yen for the sort of administration fee, and it involved an hour or two sitting around waiting whilst they go and check and stamp all of the papers and stuff. But it was pretty painless. When there was something he had to correct on the form, he just sort of like, wrote his name and stamped it, and that was fine. He didn't have to go home and redo it all again. He did say, and I'm not sure how much this person was joking, but somebody went away with a ruler to make sure there was 3 centimeters of white space around the paper. Otherwise it wouldn't be valid or something. I don't know. I can imagine that's possibly true in Japan, but overall he said pretty painless, especially compared to the alternative of going to a lawyer and paying a lot of money. So yeah, it's a really entertaining thread anyway. So yeah, definitely worth checking that out once we publish the links. Cool. Are we going to talk about your shopping thing next time then? Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, we'll postpone that one. Right. Yeah, so last thing, we're going to go through some forum shorts and then take any more questions. And then we'll announce our next session. Awesome. So forum shorts, I went through the forum today and had a look for interesting threads that have been active recently. There's one called "How are you doing financially after COVID?" which is self-explanatory, I think. And for most people, I mean, obviously, barring having a kind of tragic experience during COVID, which is very common for a lot of people, financially, most people on the forum at least seem to actually be doing better. So whether that's from being able to work from home, or seeing salaries go up, or investing through the dips during COVID, or just being at home, not traveling, and using that money to save and invest and so on. And I found that. So I found, we basically, normally we'd be traveling a lot more, my wife and I, and we just haven't. So all that extra money
we put some into the house, the flat. We redid our kitchen, and then we basically just saved. So
Yeah.
So quality of life aside, financially, it hasn't been particularly bad for a lot of people on the forum, it seems. I can't remember anyone posting that they were worse off. Although we do have some members that worked in travel, especially inbound tourism, and they did not have a good time for the last few years.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's turned around now that tourists are back. Second thread was on bicycle insurance. So,
oh yes,
bicycle insurance is compulsory in most of Japan, through local ordinances, and it's just a good idea because bicycle insurance costs 2,000, 3,000 yen a year, and basically gives you, I think, something like 300 million yen's worth of cover for liability and third-party kind of injuries. A lot of it comes with lawyer support, so you can ask the insurance lawyer to negotiate on your behalf and so on. And I think given how it's a bit like car insurance, like driving without car insurance would be insanely stupid given the risks. And I think riding a bicycle is similar in terms of, the chance of hurting a pedestrian, the chance of damaging a vehicle, the chance of getting injured,
Yeah, the speed some of these electric bikes go, they can really do some damage, I should think.
Yeah. And even if it's not into, people stepping in front of you, that's still going to be your responsibility and so on. So,
yeah.
And family versions of this are like 6,000 yen for the whole family. So if you've got kids, definitely worth looking at that as well.
Yeah, we have it through the house insurance, I think. But even if we did it, I noticed when we renewed the car insurance, one of the options was that would you like to include bicycle insurance on that as well? So there are a few options, easy options to do it.
Yeah. I mean, so car insurance, house insurance. If you have accident and liability insurance, that's also a good one. That often's going to cover it as well.
Yeah.
And then just standalone bicycle insurance. So.
Yeah, and it was just a few thousand yen.
Well worth it given the risks involved, I think. So with insurance, we're always thinking, what is the catastrophic worst case scenario? How likely is it? And how much is the insurance? And with those three pieces of information, you can make a decision on whether you need the insurance or not. And if it costs 2,000 yen and the worst case scenario is, hundreds of millions, then.
Actually, related to that, there was the news of the having to wear a helmet when you cycle being compulsory, being law now. And I saw you in the threads as well, so correct me if I'm wrong, but there is that either just has become law, it's about to become law, but there's no punishment. So if you're caught riding a bicycle without a crash helmet, this does not apply to motorbikes, by the way, a pedal cycle or an electric bicycle, without a helmet, you are breaking the law, but the police have no powers to actually fine you. They could probably stop you and talk to you for an hour or something, but they can't actually, give you.
Yeah, I think the law isn't that you have to wear a helmet. The law is that you have to make an effort to wear a helmet. So, not wearing a helmet is not breaking the law because you might be making an effort to wear a helmet. Yeah, it's basically, it's a pointless gesture. Right. I've heard a conspiracy theory that said that the reason that they brought this in is so that if you have an accident and the police come and check and they make a note that you weren't wearing a helmet, then it might invalidate your insurance.
Yes, I saw that as well. Yeah, so we don't know for sure, but when you get bicycle insurance, consider that.
I just wear a helmet. I mean, come on. I've worn a helmet for 15 years now cycling in Japan. Like it's not difficult. And I've been grateful of it once when I did fall on my head. So
oh dear.
Yeah. So I think that's a bit of a no-brainer too. Like cool. Next one was the deadline but this is very niche. So if you're a UK citizen and you are not currently paying into the UK state pension on a voluntary basis, you should think about doing so because it's a great deal. And there's a deadline this year. So this year until July, the government allows you to back pay 16 years rather than normal 6. So yeah, that can be a really good deal. So if you're interested, we've got a video. There'll be a link in the description.
Yep.
Yeah, and then we actually had a thread about survivor pensions, given, I wrote, interesting considering we had that story, but this is survivor pensions in Japan. And, who might be liable, who might be able to get one, how much it might be, and so on. So they're not particularly generous. There's lots of different variations of why you might be able to get a pension or not. So have a look at the thread because there's a lot of detail in there. And then we had a really nice kind of feel-good thread about someone got permanent residency. And then we had a kind of discussion about, what the procedure is like, how long it takes, that kind of thing. My take on permanent residency is, for most people, it's a really good idea. You don't have to renew your visa anymore, which is wonderful. Every 7 years, you have to go and pick up your new IDU card, but it takes 5 minutes. So compared to trying to renew your visa, like no brainer. You can do any kind of work you want.
Start a company.
Yeah, do anything. And most importantly, if something happens to your job or your marriage or your spouse, you don't have to suddenly leave Japan at short notice. So that's probably the most important thing. Now, the drawbacks of permanent residency is that you become liable for inheritance tax abroad and gift tax abroad. If you weren't already on a spouse visa. So spouse visas and permanent residents have to pay tax on foreign inheritances. But if you're on a working visa, you don't. So if you're likely to get an enormous inheritance at some point, you probably don't want to leave being on a working visa. But yeah, do some research and check out what would be best for your situation. Oh, and you can get bank loans if you have a permanent resident. That's the other big one. So you can get a mortgage easily.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I think that brings us to the end of our scheduled content. So if we've got any questions, we can run through those.
We have, yeah.
Oh, we
I
have.
really appreciate the people giving us questions. It's good to see the activity there. Now then, go up. Kai has, so we're talking about permanent residency. He says he has permanent residency, but he works for a small company with only 20 employees. Is it going to be hard for him to get a mortgage, a home loan? He heard that it's much easier to get a home loan if you work for a big company.
It can be. The main thing is if you're an employee, it's easier than if you were freelance or a small business owner. And generally, they want to see 2 or 3 years of continued employment. So as long as you've been at your company for 2 or 3 years, that should satisfy most places. And then the other thing is to shop around, because there's dozens of banks. So definitely go and talk to several different banks. So not just the kind of the national mega banks, but also the local banks, because they often will give you a better deal. These local ones, because they're competing for customers more than the mega banks are.
Mm-hmm.
So I got my mortgage from Shonai Ginko, which is a small local bank from Iwate. But of all the banks I talked to, they gave me the best rate, and they were the most kind of friendly and welcoming in terms of customer service. So lowest rate and best service. So I went with them. But I talked to about 10 different banks. I just spent one morning walking around Sendai and went into all the banks and said, "What can you do for me?"
You did it yourself? You didn't go through the real estate agent?
No, we were buying a second-hand place off someone we knew. So.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay, right. I would add to that actually. So Emil Gorgis from realestate.jp, he is a real estate agent in Tokyo who helps foreign individuals and families find their home in Japan. And so I haven't actually worked with him, but I went to a conference where he was a speaker and I chatted with him. Very, very interesting. And one thing I picked up was that every bank is different. And so some banks might say you need at least 2 years of salary. Some banks might say you need 3. Some also have different priorities. So some will focus more on whether you've got the certain visa or how long you've been here. Other banks won't care about that, but they will care about what kind of company you work for. So there is no one rule that says a bigger company is going to make it easier for you to get a loan. It really depends on the individual banks. So yeah, either do what Ben did and go around walking and speaking to all of them, or you could go through a broker who's got experience in this, like Emil, and they know sort of straight away which banks are going to be more likely to be generous in your situation.
Awesome.
Yeah, good question. Thank you, Kai. James again was talking about the inheritance, and I think it's worth mentioning this. That we've been talking about the rules of when you do your own will, and then whether you have to pay tax or whatever, and stuff like that. But he's thinking from the inheritor's point of view as well. There could be a nasty surprise or a catch-22 situation for them where they get, for example, a house in the will, and then they have to sell the house and pay tax on that or something to be able to pay the inheritance tax on that. I don't know. I think his message is basically think about the inheritors from the tax point of view, as well as just not just what you're going to give them, basically.
Yes, I mean, this January, my wife and I sat down with her parents, and we went through their will, and we went through all their bank accounts, and we went through all their insurance policy. We just kind of talked about it, what they were doing and what they wanted to do and what was going to happen. And I really recommend that exercise. Just sit down with your family and say, okay, this is what we want to happen. And this is what we have. And just then everyone's on the same page. Everyone understands what's going on. No one's going to make assumptions and then be like upset and disappointed and so on. So
yeah, right there.
Communication, I think, is the key.
Yes. And then we have one final question here from Tim again, who's asking, does Japan have a common law type marriage?
Oh, that's really interesting, because I was talking about that today to someone.
Should we just clarify what this question means? So you're not sort of, what is it now? You're not legally married, but you're living together as effectively long-term partners.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't know. This matters a lot because often, if you're dealing with a hospital or you're dealing with, the police or any kind of official kind of institution, often they're not going to talk to people who don't have a kind of family relationship, a legal kind of relationship. So that's a really good question. And I don't think so, but
yeah, I'm not aware of that.
But I mean, recently there's various locations in Japan that have been recognizing gay partnerships, and giving them that kind of legal status so that they can deal with hospitals so possibly that's something we could look into let's do some research for the next episode.
Yeah, I can't find a quick answer to that, I'm afraid. Yeah,
we will look into it, and we'll put it in RetireJapan TV 6 next month.
Yes, yeah. We have one more quick question from Kai again. Does it make sense if my parents start transferring money to me up to 1.1 million yen, which I believe is the gift tax threshold? Does it make sense if my parents start transferring money to me up to 1.1 million yen for several years so they don't have to deal with inheritance tax and all the complications?
Yes, but you have to be very careful that they don't say, hey, we're going to give you 10 million yen in installments, because if they do that, then the tax office will just say, okay, that was just one gift, and charge you tax on that. So basically, if you try and structure it, or if the tax office believes that you've structured it. So if you tell someone, hey, I'm going to give you 6 million yen, but to avoid gift tax, I'll just give it to you over the next 6 years. Mm-hmm. Legally, that's basically giving you 6 million yen, and therefore it'll be taxed in that way.
Even though it's within the threshold each year?
Yeah, because it is deemed to be one thing that you've just structured to avoid tax. So I think that the advice is it should look like random gifts. So you don't want them to happen on the same day every single year, for example.
What about a monthly? I'm putting some money into my wife's bank account every month, making sure we stay under the limit for the year. Would that?
Well, the thing is, that would probably look like money for living expenses.
Right. Okay.
Which isn't subject to gift tax. And you can actually pay people's living expenses even if they might not need it. So you could pay your family's rent, you could pay your children's rent for them, and then they can just bank their salary. And I think that's okay. So that might be one way of doing it if Kai wants their parents to just, pay the rent or buy food or whatever. So
so it's not necessarily a gift, it's for living.
It's paying for living expenses, yeah.
That's good.
Also things like educational expenses you can pay for your children or grandchildren, and so on. But yeah, I think it's a good idea. I'm planning to do this with my grandkids. So I'm trying to just give them random money every so often. Once we're kind of settled and they're grown up. But just be careful that it's not retroactively deemed to be one single gift. It's probably fine. But the tax office does have the ability to be like, okay, this looks like a structured kind of single large gift rather than 10 random independent gifts.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe change the amounts and change the dates each year, and then it's probably going to look a lot better. If you get 1.1 million on every January 1st, that's going to look a bit sus, I think.
Part of a plan, yeah. Yeah. Okay. We've done all the comments then. Kai says thank you. So yeah, thank you everybody for all the questions and comments that we've had. That was great.
Thanks for joining us. Nice foreshadowing there, Daniel. Very nice foreshadowing. So our next session is going to be on April 17th with special guest.
Of course. Yes, I hadn't forgotten at all. Emil, who I just mentioned earlier.
You're gorgeous, who works as a real estate mortgage broker. Yes. Come back next month with your real estate questions because he'll be able to answer those.
Yes. So he is a very good speaker. He was, when I saw his presentation, he was really sort of open about the details without revealing specific names. He would give sort of case studies of different people looking to that he dealt with who had tried to buy a home, and pretty much all happy endings. So he's got positive stories and very helpful practical information if you're trying to get a home or a mortgage in Japan.
Awesome. We're going to be talking to him next time on April 17th. If all goes to plan, I'll be flying to Europe shortly after that.
Nice.
My tickets still haven't cleared. I'm still waitlisted, but fingers crossed. Come on, ANA. But yeah, April 17th, 8 p.m., same place.
Yep. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks a lot. Have a good rest of the evening and see you next month.
See you.
Bye-bye.